And there's like, I think raid leading
Really?
is really like, it's an art form, not a science, right? There's many different ways to do it correctly. There's not just a right way to raid lead and a wrong way. There's not. There's many ways to do it correctly. If it's working for your team, that's all that matters.
Should be up.
Everybody's
so
have
can
their
you
style. Just
pause on pause.
find your style.
I'm just gonna let it play for the most part, but I'm assuming.
All right, so now
everybody
we're getting
watched
into
this,
Queen's Court now. This is our Queen's Court.
the timers
Damn,
was
look
they-
at this
they
thing.
talk
This
too
thing is
fast, so learning
impressive.
everything was a pain in the ass. So I'm just gonna let it roll and I'll say what I have to say. So all right,
Let's
so
scoot this body over.
starting
here.
out, the boss
Look
is
at this.
it's two different bosses with separate health pools. You know, each boss has different abilities and a Jara wide and
That's
extra
awesome.
actions that need to be performed. Some basic information on the fight. The tanks will need to keep the bosses spread 21 yards apart, or they will get a 99% reduced damage buff. Syllabus
Look at that,
applies
isn't
an
that
attack
great?
speed debuff, and Pashmar applies a
That's a
debuff
Death
that
Jester
limits you to
strat
tank at
strategy.
10
That's
stacks,
awesome.
and you'll be swapping around 8 ideally. Not sure if you guys discussed something else. Bosses will need to be killed at the same time, or at 1% they become immune and charge channeling that heals 50% of their maximum health. This is interrupted when both Pashmar and Sylvaz are defeated. So we need to kill them pretty spot on as close as possible.
Did Dan make that? He, I'm sure, participated in
As far as
making it. He was
positioning
part of
goes,
the
if you look on the
strategy
sheet we
group,
have, I just
and
drew up a little
that
picture
is
there.
him talking. Yes.
Open to suggestions because there was a few concerns that were brought up by a few people. But as far as the positioning that I have here, tanks will have the bosses is on the opposite, one in the middle, one on the opposite side of the room. Melee will be on Sylvaz, and the range will be at max range on the opposite side of Pashmar. So you'll be max range for Pashmar at all times so that you can avoid the damage that we will talk about in a minute. I wanted to ask the tanks now. It's easy for you guys to just swap positions, right? Not swap bosses. Or is there, do you guys see any? So, like, I mean, I've seen the pictures of the charge and the monk teleport and stuff like that.
I think depending on the tanks that we're using would dictate that. More mobile tanks, we could just keep the bosses stationary and the tanks would swap. Less mobile, we would have to move bosses and probably get some downtime.
Okay, so if we were able to, if we don't have the mobility, would it be? I don't think it'd be a huge deal if they were immune for a little bit, right? Just to limit the movement by the range, because otherwise the range are going to have to shift back and forth. This way, the range can just stay still 100%. The boss moves, the melee stays. There's little movement. We can discuss it again later on if you want, if it's going to be an issue. But that's what I have for now, just to limit the movement. As far as, so like I said, the range will be on the opposite side. We can potentially limit movement if tanks want to swap positions rather than the bosses moving, like I said.
He calls you mom also. He calls me dad.
Allows the range to be closer, and we most likely do this to help with the mythic changes. As far as the individual boss abilities and mechanics,
right?
we have Sylvaz the Zealous. He has an ability called Commander's Fury, which is the tank debuff, applies a debuff that increases the boss attack speed. And it drops when he hits another target, so we could potentially be considering using a bubble taunt, or maybe
just dad. Luckily,
that won't work.
I think that's a good thing.
No,
that
it
won't
won't
actually work. So it's coded so that it has to be a other tank, someone flagged as a tank that gets hit, or he just keeps his stacks.
Okay, good to know then. Okay, so you guys will be swapping, when you're swapping with your 8 stacks on the mind control one, the other debuff. So the other next ability he has is called Frenetic Charge. It's similar to the third boss in
Hey, I like Dan. I'm a fan of Dan.
He selects a target
Dan
and
is
charges them
he's a
after
different
6
kind of
seconds.
guy.
The charge
He's got a different sense of humor. I like it. Little weird at times, but my sense of humor is pretty fucked up as well.
Called the Mighty Rupture at the location that deals ticking damage every 2 seconds.
He can dish out
so ideally,
some shit talk, but he can take it.
Targeted, or
a lot of people who dish out the shit talk can't
I don't think melee can be targeted, but if we can, we can just shift back behind the group.
And he's good. He's competent.
The sheet, we'll just the blue
I got nothing bad to say.
We'll be dropping the pools to keep them as far away as possible because they do last for a long duration during the fight. So being able to control them will be give us more space to move around and spread. And as far as soaks go, the way I looked at it is, the more people in there, I don't know if there's a max amount of players that can soak it, but if we're just charging through the whole raid, there's minimal damage to everybody. His next ability would be Zealous Eruption. Sylvaz spawns a series of geysers that inflict 150k to all players every 2 seconds. So there'll be a large bubble around him that everybody can stand in. There will be overlaps with other abilities and stuff, so we need to mind your feet and mind your positioning and pay attention to your debuffs to make sure that you are spread far enough if you have one of the abilities we're going to talk about in a minute.
For Zealous Eruption, quickly, it seems like I think probably one tank is going to be out. And that tank is going to be 10 seconds, and I think you're getting hit for a significance every 2 seconds. I think it ticks. So we've talked about using personals there, maybe calling for externals, but really just focus healing. Expect that one tank is going to be getting trucked at that point, similar to like Conclave.
Okay.
So we'll take one boss out, and the other tank will be in.
Okay, so if you want to keep that in mind, Moon, we'll find timers on them. We'll get personals or maybe an external if we have one assigned to it. Like I said, there'll be overlaps, so make sure that you're mindful of your positioning. Moving on to Pashmar, the Fanatical. Is first, the debuff, the tank debuff is called Pashmar's Touch. It applies a stacking debuff that MCs the target at 10 stacks. And like I said, you're going to want to swap.
So this is the debuff that you're concerned about as a tank. You're not really too worried about the attack speed increase buff on the other boss. You're really swapping off of the MC debuff. That's a critical one. You go to 10, you're in trouble.
Within 8 seconds,
here's the tank circle that I don't think is big enough to accommodate both tanks, especially since this one's channeling in the center.
Next one will be
so the other tank is probably going to be outside somewhere. Heavy CD,
very minimal damage.
Targeted healing,
nothing really
calling for externals if needed. That's kind of our initial game plan.
Next ability is Potent Spark. So
we're going to try to work tanks into that big circular bubble, but I don't think there's enough room there. I think it's a 21-yard immunity range.
On the Fat Boss video, I saw 3 orbs. I'm not sure if there might be more, so if someone else can comment on it, it'd be appreciated. Upon expiration, the orbs will explode, dealing 126 damage and 126k to everyone, and apply a 5-second debuff that increases the damage we take from Potent Spark by 100%. So we will need to burn one down, wait for the debuff to fall, and then move on to the next. Like I said, we can burn the first, wait for the debuff, burn the second, and then we can wait for the third and let it go on its own, or we can let people multi-dot and build their single target off of it, or we can just burn it down when the debuff's off.
Like the tree boss.
Yeah, might be a good fight for nullification. That's not a bad point. Maybe in the minor.
I don't
know. It's like botanist.
Yeah,
those 3 bubbles will be static the entire time. They spawn in the same exact spot every time they spawn. There's only 3.
Okay. And then
I think minor nullification is decent. Major,
we need to be mindful.
Again, here's that tank circle. I don't think this is 21 yards. So here's the other tank out there.
Not me at all have a problem with that. So
I'm going to test this tomorrow morning just to confirm. There's no way that's 21 yards. So we'll be taking out.
And then next one is called Violent Outburst. Pashmar releases a wave in all directions, dealing 225k damage to all enemies. The damage is significantly reduced by distance. So the further are you away, mid-range will always be max range for Pashmar, so you have nothing to worry about. Melee, we should be away from him because we're going to be on Syllabaz, but if we have to swap to balance out the damage on the bosses, then just make sure we're running out as far as possible and as soon as possible.
Is having any of y'all play Matchmaker too?
Moving on to Azara's Decrees, the extra actions we're going to be performing. Our first one will be called
he's talked to the wife a little bit about that.
Circles will appear on the ground that explode if not soaked quickly. For every, there will be a potential overlaps with Zealous Eruptions prepared to be in the bubble around Sylvaz. So generally the orbs will be right around the middle where we are tanking Sylvaz. That's why it's ideal that we tank them in the middle. So we can be in the orbit and soak in the circles as well.
Thanks for the follow, Captain.
For every circle that's not
appreciate it,
soaked, the damage that will be AoE at the end of the decree will be increased. Next one's called Repeat Performance, and players must not cast the same spell or ability twice in a row, or they will be silenced for 2 seconds.
Hey, Fan, hey, how are you, man?
APOC for this fight, because Fury Warriors are screwed. But yeah, just don't cast the same thing every time. And you'll be fine. Next one will be Stand Alone. Players must spread to avoid dealing ticking damage to other players.
That's me.
It's pretty simple, straightforward. Just move out and do not stand on anybody. I'm not sure of the range, but there's a circle around the player that's rather easy to see. So just make sure you're not overlapping over the person. The next one will be Deferred Sentence. Standing still generates stacks that increase the damage taken while moving. Moving inflicts damage, and when the decree expires, you will take instant damage that scales by the amount of stacks you generated. This lasts for 30 seconds. The stacks drop as you move, so make sure that you are moving in short bursts every few seconds, similar to the Coven boss in Waycrest Manor. So cast, step, and then just make sure you manage your stacks. And we can pretty keep much in the 1 to 5 range rather easily. Next one, the last decree would be called Obey or Suffer. All players are marked to suffer.
How's it going, Aster? How's it going, man? Nice to see you.
They're inflicted with suffering, and while players suffering, they absorb all healing for 5 seconds. There will be a 5-second grace period in between sufferings where you can be topped off, so you won't be able to be healed for 5 seconds, and the damage you took will be when you're out of your health bar.
Again, this
have at least 5 seconds to top you off.
Spreadsheet, this group really,
obviously the goal
I think, hit the ball out of the park.
Avoidable damage
on their spreadsheet work. The spreadsheet's looking really good. It's looking ready. This is
than
about
that,
what our
that's all
mythic
for
spreadsheets
heroic.
look like when they're
There's
set
a
up.
little glimpse that we had of the mythic
The
changes.
example boss
It
is
looks
probably
like
a real
Ishika's
great
going to animate
idea
an
of a
aura
mythic
upon one of the
spreadsheet.
structures around the room, blocking off a large portion of the room, and
This
then
one,
the
not
auras
so
will
much.
rotate around the room.
But
So
this one
positioning
really
will be
looking
shifting
good.
quite a bit.
Turn the
Like I
volume,
said,
yeah.
we'll update the.
Yep.
I'm going to update the forum whenever we have positioning changes added on there. But ideally, I would say we keep the bosses separated the same way they are. Where Pashmar is, if say the auras are rotating clockwise, we'll keep Pashmar on the ahead of the group, and then Silabaz on top of the group, cleave them down, etc., and then just move with the auras. But
Is that
that's
any
pretty
better for
much
you?
it. Anybody have any questions?
Small note to add: the decree that you can't take damage, that does apply to tanks.
Yeah.
So there will be so the tanks are going to have basically 5-second bursts where you can heal them, and then 5 seconds where you can't. So that's
So
going to
we
be fun.
consider.
So if you take damage, and like, we would have to heal you with the tanks,
Void Stone. What? Sorry, what?
So would we have to consider maybe swapping at lower stacks when we get to that point?
It won't be so much swapping at lower stacks as just
Because the attack.
we'll be using more of our personals there, as well as just you'll watch a tank for 5 seconds, be unable to heal them, and then you'll have to dump all of your healing in at that point.
Okay.
Blood DK is useless.
Sounds like a nice spot for
Yes.
Expel Harm.
Just one thing, I guess. So it's kind of like how for Queen Ajara in Intermission, everyone has their own decrees, right? Have we found a weak aura that will kind of do this for
Disc
the
Priest,
Queen's Court
yep.
also? Have we looked into that? For I would say potentially like a Yell macro or a Yell weak aura for the. I would say the ones that would probably need it for are the healing one and maybe the standalone one, just so people can see that properly, right?
Hey, Blake.
So
Arcadius, thanks for the follow, man. Appreciate it.
package that'll get linked to a spreadsheet. I'm not sure what it entails. We'll have to look through it and then look for specific.
We can adapt the Ashara one to this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's going to be the same thing. It'll be a debuff that'll go out from a cast. We'll just change the boss. We'll change what the auras are. And it should be just fine.
Yep. Sounds good.
There are also some decree helpers already on Wago. I'm not sure if any of them are good or not. I see Relo has one, so
Eli
I think that
links,
is-
I think with Relos, in the Ashara one. That's the one I said we could, if needed, we can just adapt that one. I'm sure one will come out for Queen's Court as well.
You probably just need to change counter ID for it to work.
I mean, shield, any kind
Well,
of damage
the,
reduction. I think most tanks, if you're planning ahead, should be able to survive 5 seconds without healing, especially if you're getting reasonably
it wouldn't be
topped
tough to
beforehand. It's something that we'll all have to learn to play around, healers and
Pretty
tanks,
much all the
more than
damage
anything.
from this fight comes from the potent spark, and some overlaps with the potent spark. So the cooldowns are assigned to cover the 3 explosions, and you kind of want to get people topped off before the next explosion goes off.
So here we're talking about potent sparks. As an example, here's the
there's one
last
part,
set.
really
511 is the
scary part of
first one,
fight,
525, 535, so 10 seconds or so.
Like 2:10 to 3 minutes, when you have all the sparks exploding, and then a frenetic charge, and then people doing their deferred sentence thing, like stopping and
That's all right
all
here.
of that. So that's why we have like rally and all that. And everything else, like the other overlaps and other damage stuff, could just be healed, just with regular heal, mini cooldowns like the Tree of Life and stuff.
Also, something to consider is the 2 logs that I looked at. They were less than. I can't really think of another reason why we would need the less stealth.
Sorry, what?
On pull.
Okay.
I tried to add that on the sheet, it just wouldn't let me type.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, let's move along then. I think we're on to Zaku if my math is correct.
All right.
Can someone double check scans